Welcome back to the latest episode of Ask an Adventurer. If you want to ask a question, fill in the form and I'll answer anything. Question 1 today. Are you training for any running adventures? Would you ever want to try anything really big like a 100-mile race or the Bob Graham Round? Well, in case you don't know the Bob Graham Round, it's done by a bloke called Bob Graham who, midlife crisis, age 42, ran over 42 peaks in the Lake District in 42 hours. It's something I really wanted to do. I've recce'd it quite a lot, I've trained for it quite a lot. I've even had a couple of attempts at midwinter ones which failed badly, but I've never done it. And a few years ago I was really trying to do it, but my hamstrings were just really hurting after really long runs, so I never did it. And this isn't me crying with emotion, although I am gutted. I really want to do Bob Graham Round, and I really want to do it one day, but I'm not sure it's going to happen quite soon. I mostly run 10Ks these days, so that's quite a long way of the Bob Graham Round. Would I ever like to do something as big as a 100-mile race? I'd love to do a 100-mile race in America. That's definitely on my to-do list. I'd like to do one of those races where you get the belt buckle when you've finished. I think they're really cool. But perhaps nothing as hardcore as the Barkley Marathons. That's insane. If you haven't seen that, look on YouTube for a film called The Race That Eats Its Young. Barkley Marathons, completely nuts. And also read up about Yasmin Paris, British woman who just became the first woman to finish the Barkley Marathons. Very impressive. Do you have a desired format for writing? Some like the Pomodoro technique? What do you do? Pomodoro technique's great. Essentially it's 25 minutes of writing, 5-minute rest, and you can get an app that does this, and it's really good if you're struggling for motivation. You just blitz it, 20 minutes, 5-minute rest, 20 minutes, So Pomodoro technique is great, and sometimes when I struggle for motivation I do that sort of thing, but I don't really have a format. I guess I just write till I get distracted, then I check BBC Sport, then I write a bit more, then I have a cup of coffee, then I check BBC Sport, and weirdly nothing's happened in the last 5 minutes, so like that, I guess. Do you tend to type or handwrite? I always type my books out of pure laziness. I can't be bothered to handwrite them and then type them later. Also, increasingly, as dictation gets better, I'm starting to speak more for the early phases of writing. I use a website called otter.ai for that, and then tidy up all my, speech rubbish using ChatGPT to just start things up as the first draft of writing. Apart from books and websites, what's your personal writing habit look like? Do you enjoy journaling on the trail? Yeah, when I'm away on my adventures, I always write diaries, and I really enjoy doing that. At home, I tend to write a journal just when I'm sort of struggling to sort of figure out work type issues or life type issues, and also there's a website called maildiary.net which I started. It sends you an email and then you reply to that email and it adds it to a diary, and I started doing that the week before my kid was born, and I've done that pretty much every day, and I think that is actually my only useful bit of parenting advice. But yeah, when I'm away on trips I like to write diaries. They're on this bookshelf. I was going to get them down but I can't be bothered, but because they're squashed by a load of books. But yeah, I handwrite in notebooks when I'm away on adventures. I don't want us to be writing in a phone. That's a rubbish kind of journal. Ernest Hemingway would not have used the Notes app on his phone. How do you manage burning restlessness to seek adventure, set off around the world without a plan to come back, versus relationships, wanting to build a stable family life and a partner who's a bit less of a dream and more content in the present and routine? Money, jobs feel easier to argue against. They're things that have feelings or emotions. A relationship, perhaps a partner or family, is harder to balance up against an adventure. That's a really interesting way of thinking of it, isn't it? You know, if someone says, oh, I really want to go and have a huge adventure, but I can't because I need to earn £50,000 a year and buy a new car, then I think most sensible people would say, don't be a moron, just go. But if it's the case, I really want to go on an adventure, but I don't want to mess up my relationship and family, then perhaps more sensible people would say, well, what would they say? So the short answer to this question is, oh look, I'm wearing the correct t-shirt. The short answer to this is Micro Adventures. The book I wrote, Micro Adventures, was very much aimed at trying to address that balance between restlessness for adventure and wildness and challenge and fun and freedom and spontaneity and simplicity versus the pragmatic realities of life. So yeah, Micro Adventures is my solution to restlessness. How do you deal with all the decisions which are necessary for preparations of a large expedition? Can you recommend when to start planning one? And how do I calm down my mind that everything will somehow work? That's interesting. She goes on to say she gets stressed because of all the decisions, then kept procrastinating, overthinking, pressuring myself that because I know this trip could be life-changing, and I plan to use the trip to start my working adventurer. So you're building this up to be a really big deal. So when would you start planning? Well, depends what the trip is, depends what your aims is, depends what your objectives are. If you're going to go and climb K2 in the middle of winter, I suggest you start planning immediately, because if you don't sort out all your kit, your logistics, your schedule, your plan, your fitness, your finances, then you will die or fail. If you are planning to cycle from your front door to Morocco, then perhaps you're brave enough to just think, well, I'll just get my passport out the drawer and my credit card in my pocket, get on my bike, and I'll leave this lunchtime. And I've got no idea where I'm going, but maybe that will add to the experience. And then there's everything in between those adventures as well. When I cycled around the world, I did quite a lot of planning, preparation, organising of visas, thinking things through, writing endless lists, and I was quite anxious. I was trying to cycle from England to Australia. It's a long way. It needed a lot of planning. I needed a lot of confidence to get out the door and go. 2 weeks into my trip, 9/11 happens, the war in Afghanistan starts, I can't cycle through Asia, I turn right to Africa, and I cycle through Africa, essentially just winging it, making it all up as I went along. I would not have had the courage to just set off from home and cycle through Africa with no planning, but all the planning I'd done turned out to be useless for what I was actually doing. But what it was very useful for was that it gave me the confidence to begin, to get out the door, to start. And then once I was cycling, I realised that, well, this isn't actually very complicated. You just need to find somewhere to put up your tent, buy some bananas and keep going. So it's pretty simple. So I think a lot of planning is about the confidence side of things. And it sounds to me like you're quite a worried person. So I think if I was you, I'd write down a list of every single thing that you need to do so it's out of your brain onto a piece of paper, and then rank that list of things in terms of, if I do not do this thing, then the trip will not happen. And write down the list of, if I do not do these things, then I might well die. If I do not do these things, then the film making that I'm hoping will kickstart my career will not happen. And then all those things you've got on the list, tackle them and get them done and make sure they're done really well. And then perhaps all the other stuff on the list, some of the frillier, woollier stuff that maybe you realise it's not that important, it's just for my confidence. So sort out what you absolutely must do, and then if you've got any time left, tackle the rest. But crucially, set a date in your diary and begin. And who knows, perhaps if it's a bit chaotic and strugglesome and worrisome and scary, that might make better film footage and make a better story in the long run. You mentioned you always mark the day you finish school in your mental calendar. Why is that? That's a good question. Yeah, June the 16th, I finished my A-levels, and in my mind, that was the day freedom, my life could begin. I was lucky. I went to good school. I worked pretty hard. I got really good exam grades, but I just it was not. I was just formulaically learning textbooks. I wasn't educating myself, and so I was just excited then to get out and begin my life and my learning. So I always remember that date with great delight. Do you prefer to adventure alone or with others? Oof. I like to alternate my adventures. There are pros and cons of solo adventures versus with other people, the challenge aspect versus the fun, the self-reliance versus the empathy. So there's pros and cons of both. But overall, I'd say I like to alternate adventures with someone else and adventures by myself. Thanks for your questions. Please keep them coming in. See you soon for Ask an Adventurer. Hiccup. Cut.